of you won't, all right? But it's a hotbed of contention in the community of video games. But it is time to talk about Final Fantasy 16, okay? There's a reason I'm bringing it up today, but please bear with me, okay? When Final Fantasy 16 released back in, what was it, June? Was it June or July? I think it was June, right? Late June. There was a hotbed of contention because people were like, whoa, this game is not adhering to all of the tropes that Final Fantasy usually adheres to. It broke the mold when it came to the style of combat for the game, which was more action-based rather than any kind of turn-based combat. Although it maintained a lot of the creatures and stuff from the Final Fantasy universe, the lore and everything was completely shattered, and the game had a more adult-oriented writing style with gore and sex and all kinds of stuff, swearing for the first time in a Final Fantasy game. Correct? So, Final Fantasy 16 comes out to 3 million sales. They basically said that in the first month, 3 million copies sold, you know, based on pre-orders and strong initial sales and all of that. All right? And so, based on that, everyone thinks, oh, the game's doing really well. What's really weird about this was, within the first week or two of the game being out, all of a sudden, all of these game content creators are praising the game. Oh, this is the best Final Fantasy ever. Oh, I love it. It's my favorite one and all of this, right? And everyone's talking about, oh my God, it's so good. 2 weeks. And within 2 weeks of the game being out, all of the hoopla for the game died out completely. Content creators stopped talking about the game as if it never existed. And the whole game just went, and everyone's like, what happened, right? Now, people who continued to play the game, all right, seemed to like it. But a lot of other people kind of fell off and said, oh, we're not talking about it anymore, right? I'm one of the few people who hung in there. And I played the entire game from start to finish. It took a while. It was not a short game, right? I want to argue it was around a 40 or more hour playthrough. So we got through it. And you know my thoughts about the game by the end of it. It wasn't a horrible game, but man, they veered so far from the formula of what Final Fantasy is. You know, it's like they purposefully went out of their way to say, call it Final Fantasy, but make it nothing like any previous Final Fantasy, right? And I even, in the early hours of the game, I defended it. I said, look at the track record of Final Fantasy. Yes, in the 1990s, it started off as a turn-based RPG. If you look at Final Fantasy 1 through like 7, 8, they're very similar. Then in games like 9, 10, they started to veer from that and change the formula up. 11 was an MMO. 12 was a hybrid that played like an MMO but was a single-player game. 13 took turn-based elements but combined it with a whole new system that made it feel different. 14, again, was an MMO. 15 was another completely different formula. Now it's completely open world, roaming around with a party the entire game. All these different aspects added to it. So my argument early on with Final Fantasy 16 was, if you're going to hate on Final Fantasy 16, you got to understand that Final Fantasy has been different over the years already. It's not like this is the first game that veered from that formula. This game has always veered from the formula for like the last 15, 20 years. It keeps trying to change itself and reinvent itself, right? But by the end of the game, I had to agree with a lot of the people who criticized the game. The game veered too far. It's one thing to say, we're going to do some things differently. It's another thing to say, here's all the tried and true things people know about Final Fantasy that work. Throw them away. We don't need them. We're doing our own thing, and too bad if you don't like it, because this is where we're going with the direction of the franchise. It was stupid, because if you have things that work, and I'm not saying, hey, totally keep every single thing, but at least keep some commonalities of the things people are expecting from your franchise. What if Street Fighter 7 came out, and Street Fighter 7 decided it was a survival horror game? Right? People were like, what? Yeah, oh yeah, Street Fighter, because you're fighting for your life in the streets from hordes of vampires. That's Street Fighter 7. What? No. That's Street Fighter is supposed to be a 2D fighting game. Is that no? We're doing it different this time. Oh, okay, but we're calling it Street Fighter 7, right? Oh, I mean that's essentially what Final Fantasy 16 is. They threw away all the things that made Final Fantasy good and made it a new game. Now some people really like that new game they came up with, but admittedly I can understand why a lot of people got upset and irked by it and said, no, this is not what we want from a game called Final Fantasy. And I actually made the comparison, okay, during my playthrough. Do you guys remember the movie back from the early 2000s, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, okay? So this movie was one of the early full CGI movies at a time when not a lot of movies were going full CGI, and the fact that it was a video game movie being called Final Fantasy, a lot of people were interested in it and wanted to see it, especially people who were hardcore fans of Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy was at the height of its popularity in the 90s and early 2000s. People were loving it. So to have a movie of Final Fantasy, oh, let's see it, it's going to blow us away. And here's what happened, okay? A ton of people went to the movies to see Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. I was one of them. And guess how much of that movie had to do with Final Fantasy? Probably about 2%. The main plot was about how the planet was being destroyed, and there was some kind of a power source that was crystallizing everything, essentially killing it. And it was very, very reminiscent of, say, the plotline of Final Fantasy VII, where, you know, you're using the Mako energy or Mako energy and you're destroying the planet and stuff like that. It was very similar to that. But there were no elements that were similar to Final Fantasy. There were no crystals. There were no Moogles. There were no creatures. It was a sci-fi movie, essentially. Okay? So, what did it have to do with Final Fantasy? Nothing. Guess how it performed? Horribly. It tanked. Because via word of mouth, people found out this has nothing to do with Final Fantasy. It's just a name thing. They name dropped Final Fantasy to try to sell copies. It's bullshit. So, it did terribly. And basically, after that, Square Enix never bothered again. I mean, I think they've made various movies over the years, but they were always tie-ins with the video games. They didn't bother trying to make their own standalone thing ever again because the movie flopped so hard. Okay? So that's kind of the same feeling I have about Final Fantasy 16. They really wanted to try something and call it Final Fantasy, but not have it be Final Fantasy. It didn't work. You know, initially you had your shills. Within the first 2 weeks of the game being out, everyone kissing the game's butt. But they disappeared after 2 weeks when the money dried out. And after that, all the hype for Final Fantasy 16 fizzled. You know what's funny? Usually when a new Final Fantasy game comes out, you've got tons of memes. You've got tons of things that resonate. You've got people talking about epic fights. You got people talking about the music. No one right now is talking about Final Fantasy 16 whatsoever. It's as if the game never existed. I played the whole game from start to finish. I have absolutely no remembrance of anything notable. I don't even have a song stuck in my head. And that never happened. Usually when I play Final Fantasy 15, the theme song of combat is stuck in my head, or a big epic boss fight. Like when I think Final Fantasy 15, I think about the optional dungeon that has all those cool puzzles in it, and some super enemies, like the ginormous Adamantoise tortoise. Like that, I remember that, because those are the epic parts of the playthrough. When I think Final Fantasy 13, I think about being in the open world for the first time, and you hear that epic vocal music. Do 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 do. Memories of life. I hear that. I still remember that. That was resonated with me, and I'll remember that forever. Like that was a really cool part of the game. I remember it. I don't remember diddly dick about Final Fantasy 16. The game was not memorable in any fucking thing whatsoever. It tried too hard to copy what other people had done, and it's failed because of that, in my opinion. Okay? So now, why am I bringing all of this up? Okay? Well, the funny part about it is, since the game released, and we heard initially 3 million sales, there has not been a single reported piece of data anywhere on the sales of Final Fantasy 16. Square Enix has not said a word. They have the numbers, but they're refusing to talk about them. Okay? Last month, in an interview, one of the high-ups at Square Enix was asked directly, did Final Fantasy 16 perform to your expectations? And the outright answer they gave, no. They thought the game was going to sell much better. They feel that it underperformed. Now, that's all they said. But if you take a look at a kind of apples-to-apples comparison, Final Fantasy 15, within within 10 days of release, sold 3.5 million copies. So in a comparable time frame, Final Fantasy 15 sold more than Final Fantasy 16. And then after that, it sold more and more, and then there were DLCs that sold more. We don't know anything. They won't even tell us how Final Fantasy 16 is doing. As if, you know, it never existed. They don't want us to know the truth. Okay? In addition, the sales reports, essentially, not the sales reports, but the overall profit reports, Square Enix had an insanely low-performing quarter. Now, you might argue, could it really have been because of the one game? No. I don't think that any particular company the size of Square Enix is really saying one game is make or break. At the same time, this really was their flagship title. When you hear Square Enix, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Final Fantasy. Now, yes, they've had other franchises over the years that have been sellers for them, but Final Fantasy is the big one that they always rely on. And the fact that this game came out like this, right? And essentially had big pre-order sales, and then after the shilling ended from content creators, no one's talking about it, that means something. Now, why am I bringing this up today? Because, ladies and gentlemen, as of today, the game has not even been out for 3 months. Not even a quarter of the year has the game been out yet. Ladies and gentlemen, today the game went on sale for a third off. So right now, if you've been holding out to buy Final Fantasy 16 and you want to buy it, it's about $25 to $30. I think it's like, originally it was $79.99. Now I think it's like $50. I want to say it's $55.99 or something like that. Check it out on Amazon. It's on sale. Everywhere it's going on sale. That's horrible. Okay? What that means is that this game sold so poorly within its first few months, they're desperate. And they're hoping by doing a price slash this early, people will buy the game before all the new fall gaming season games come out. Do you want to know the truth? I don't think it's going to work. I don't. I think the word of mouth was so bad about this game that it wasn't Final Fantasy that anyone who is interested as a holdout is going to skip it and they're going to buy other games this fall instead. You know, if they maybe did a 50% price hike, or a price slash, I should say, maybe then, but only a 30%, cutting $20 off the price, I don't think is going to be enough to save this game. But the fact that it's happened not even 3 months into the life cycle of the game, of a lengthy JRPG too. It's not like, oh, this is a game that's a multiplayer game, and you play it for a week, you've seen everything. This is a lengthy game. You know, I played it for 40 hours and got through the story. Potentially, if you do the side content, this could be like a 100-hour game. And within 3 months, they're already cutting the price in a huge way. That's bad. So, man, let me tell you guys something. How the mighty fall. And it's sad because some people revel in it. Oh my God, it's so good to see a game that used to be at the top finally at the bottom. I hate that. I don't like that at all. You know, I want games to succeed that deserve it. Final Fantasy is a franchise that was part of my childhood. It was the first RPG that I was ever introduced to in a major way and play. You know, I saw my cousin playing Dragon Quest, but then eventually Final Fantasy II was the first RPG I ever owned and played for myself. So to see basically this franchise go from the top of the RPG ladder to essentially the bottom like it has is sad. Who in the holy hell thought it was a good idea to abandon everything that people like about Final Fantasy, right? Like, on what planet do you think this is a good idea? By the way, did you not just see you resold all the classic Final Fantasies in the Pixel Remaster collection and it did well? It sold well on PC to the point where they weren't originally going to port it to consoles, and it sold so well on Steam that then they ported it to consoles and it's selling well on consoles. If those games are selling well, why are you not making more games like that? Why are you going in a completely different direction and sinking insane amounts of money and time investment into something no one has asked you for? Who was asking for Final Fantasy that plays like Devil May Cry but is a button mash fest? Like, this is a classic case of a game company that has done well for so long that they kind of feel like they can do no wrong. I mean, Final Fantasy 15 was literally sold unfinished. The game was completely a disjointed mess. The story didn't make sense because of time skips and all kinds of crap. And it was just dumb the way they set up the game. There was no reason for it to be like that. It didn't finish production and they just sold it anyway, right? But they could do no wrong. Now they pump out an entire game that no one wants, but they could do no wrong. No, they've done wrong. The sales are failing. It's time to stop the nonsense and stop believing that everything you do is right and it's the customer. Did you know that they started blaming, like, the customer base? I'm serious. Oh, the reason that the game isn't doing so well is probably because of the online hate and the viral negativity, and it's really toxic these days. Why do you think that exists? Because your game is not good. If your game was good, then it wouldn't happen. Baldur's Gate 3 didn't suffer from this. Why did you? Right? I mean, Diablo 4 admittedly had a lot of flaws. It still has a lot of flaws, but it's not virally hated on. Why your game? Probably because you abandoned the people who were supporting you to begin with. You took this fan base of people who love your franchise and you said, screw all you, we're going to make a different kind of game. Well, great, you're going to get a new fan base over here who likes a different kind of game, and you're also going to get a lot of angry, upset people over here who supported you for the last 15 games and want more of what you're good at making, right? This is the equivalent of what just happened with BioWare making Anthem. BioWare is good at making these RPGs with epic stories, good parties, exploration, all this. That's what they're good at. Then they were told, make a fucking looter shooter game. And they're like, but we don't want to make a looter shooter game. We don't want to make Destiny. We don't want to make Borderlands. We just want to make another good RPG. And they were told, make a looter shooter. So they did, and it flopped, and it failed, and now they're back to making what they're good at. Why did they think that this was going to work? I don't know. But it's just hilarious to me. We're almost 3 months in to the launch of this game, and we still don't have sales numbers besides 3 million sold at launch. That's it. They won't even say a word because they probably know it's embarrassing. I would almost bet if you compare Final Fantasy 15 to 16, 15 was here and 16 is like way down here at this point. You know, 3 months in. So that's why they don't want to say it. They're really embarrassed by it. It's pretty sad. It's sad to see a game company that was known for being the tippity top of a genre to now become obscure. Kind of like this is what happened with Street Fighter for the longest time. You know, Street Fighter, very prominent, went away in the 2000s, came back with Street Fighter 4, then completely died out during a 7-year period of Street Fighter 5. Now they're back to prominence again. Can they stay there? I hope they can. Because, man, I don't want to see them die out again. I want to see them stay at the top of their game, you know? And by the way, I really don't believe that there's any credibility to people who are like these naysayers and saying, well, that's it for Square Enix. I don't believe that. I believe that any of these companies can always find a way to come back. I do. And I think that if they get back in their way and back into what they're good at doing, that they could definitely pump out